Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about the heart. So first of all, before we really get into any of the heart itself, I want to talk a little bit about the colors that we see associated with blood vessels in the human body. Because when you look at the heart, you often see these red and blue vessels attached to it. There aren't any blue vessels in the body. The red and the blue is designating oxygen status of the blood within the tube. Red denotes high oxygen levels, and blue denotes low oxygen levels. All blood is red, though it can differ in the shade of red that it is, but all blood is red. So I don't want you to think that we really do have these blue vessels in our body. Okay, having said that, let's talk a little bit about the heart itself now. So the heart is located in the thorax, and it's located between the right and left lungs, and it's located in the mediastinum, roughly between the third and sixth ribs, and it's slightly to the left. If we were to count the vertebrae, we would say that it is between the fourth and ninth vertebra. In terms of its orientation, it's got a little point on the lower left corner, and the base of the heart is at the top, and that's where a lot of the great vessels are attached. And in terms of its size, it's about the size of your fist. So, if a child is making a fist, the child's heart size would be about the size of the fist too. And just to note, if you needed to do CPR on someone, generally the orientation that we look for is hands on the sternum between the fourth and ninth vertebra, and then do chest compressions from there. So let's take a look at the heart itself. Let's look at the wall that makes up the heart. Most of the heart wall is a type of muscle, cardiac muscle tissue, and we call this the myocardium. Myo means muscle, and cardi means heart, so this is heart muscle. And it contains cells called cardiocytes. These might also be called myocardiocytes, or sometimes people just call them heart muscle cells. So most of this wall is a bunch of muscle cells, okay? And these muscle cells are capable of contraction. Now, if we look closer at the heart wall, we'll notice that the outer layer of the heart wall is actually the visceral pericardium. So if you remember back to your serous membranes, we had a serous membrane that surrounded the heart, right? And it had two layers to it, the visceral and parietal pericardium. The visceral pericardium is the layer of the serous membrane that lies right on the heart itself. Okay? Go the opposite direction in the heart and look to the inside of the heart wall, and we find another layer here. We call this the endocardium, and it's a very smooth layer that is there to kind of just make sure blood flows really smoothly through the chambers of the heart. And then going back to the pericardium, the function of the pericardium is to reduce friction. Now let's take a look at the chambers and the great vessels associated with the heart. So the heart is actually two separate pumps that kind of are just fused together. And when we look at evolution of animals, we see that a lot of animals actually have separate heart pumps, but in the human and other species, these pumps are fused together into a single organ. So we have a right and left side that are acting as separate pumps. Okay? So we have these two separate pumps, and each is composed of two chambers, an upper chamber and a lower chamber. The upper chambers are called atria, atrium for singular, and the lower chambers are called ventricles. That's plural, or ventricle for singular. The job of the atria is to be receiving chambers. So the blood that comes back to the heart comes to the top of the heart where the atria are. Okay? The ventricle's job is to push blood away from the heart. So those are discharging chambers. Now let's take a look at some of the great vessels associated with the heart. One of the most obvious ones is the one that has the nice turn to it. That's the aorta. The job of the aorta is to bring blood out of the left ventricle. Just kind of in front to the left of that is the pulmonary trunk. The pulmonary trunk is going to bring blood out of the right ventricle. Also quite obvious are the vena cavae. So these are big veins, right? And it's their job to bring blood to the right atrium. There's a superior vena cava located superior to the heart, and inferior vena cava located inferior to the heart. And then we have the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins bring blood into the left atrium. We haven't yet defined arteries and veins. Arteries are vessels that bring blood away from the heart, and veins are vessels that bring blood to the heart. So no matter what color they look like in the picture, right, if the blood is going away from the heart, A for away, A for artery, that's an artery. If the blood is coming back towards the heart, then we're going to use a vein. So a lot of students think that all the veins are colored blue and all the arteries are colored red, but again, that's not true. We know that the color is designating the oxygen status of the blood within that vessel. So let's take a look at the heart valves. So the heart valves are structures that ensure blood is flowing only in one direction through the heart. So the valves are there to prevent backflow. And backflow does try to happen quite a lot in the heart, so these valves are really important to make sure the heart works efficiently. So there are 4 valves separated into 2 categories. The 2 categories are the atrioventricular valves and the semilunar valves. The atrioventricular valves tell you exactly where they're located. They're located between the atria and the ventricles. So we have a right AV valve and a left AV valve, but they also have other names. The left AV valve is also known as the bicuspid valve or the mitral valve. And then the right AV valve is also known as the tricuspid valve. Valves are made of these little flaps called cusps. The bicuspid valve has 2 cusps and the tricuspid valve has 3 cusps. The bicuspid valve, like I said, is on the left and the tricuspid valve is on the right. And maybe one way to remember this is that right starts with the letter R, and tricuspid has an R in it. So maybe that will help you to remember that the tricuspid valve is the one on the right. And then there are the semilunar valves. The semilunar valves are found between the ventricles and the large artery that's drawing the blood away from that ventricle. And they're named according to the vessel that's carrying the blood away from the ventricle. So we have the pulmonary semilunar valve, which is located between the right ventricle and the pulmonary trunk. And then we have the aortic semilunar valve, which is located between the left ventricle and the aorta. These valves are going to open and close in response to pressure changes in the heart, and we'll talk more about that later. This is just a different viewpoints of these different valves. So this is if we were to kind of cut off just maybe a little bit of the top of the heart and then look at it from a bird's eye view. You can see the tricuspid valve with its 3 cusps, and then the bicuspid valve with its 2. And then you can also see the aortic and semilunar valves in this picture too. So let's review the structures of the heart while we trace the path of blood through the heart. Right? Superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, and those are both delivering blood to the right atrium. Okay. Blood will flow from the right atrium into the right ventricle, passing by the tricuspid valve. From the right ventricle, the blood will flow into the pulmonary trunk, but it has to go past the pulmonary semilunar valve first. From there, the blood will be delivered to the lungs, where it will gain oxygen, and then it will come back to the heart through the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins deliver blood to the left atrium. From there, the blood will flow into the left ventricle, passing by the bicuspid or mitral valve. From there, the blood will be ejected into the aorta, and it's going to have to pass by the aortic semilunar valve as it does this. Once the blood is in the aorta, it will be delivered to many places in the body. The used blood will then return to the heart through the superior and inferior vena cavae.